Never mind. Great. beacon. Great. Fucking serious. After all that, after all that, that's wild. That's wild and crazy, kids. That's crazy. That's how I go out, though. That's crazy. Every time. I'm so sick of this. Why can't y'all just keep the settings that you had before? Why do I have to go into something and put the settings back to where they were before? Every time. Why? Oh, that's right. I need to go see about the driver first, because it has to be a driver issue. It's either in. How do I check to see if this thing needs an update? No, alright, hold on.
Ich mag nicht Erdbeere, ich mag nur Orange. Orangengeschmack. Scheiße. Ich habe eine Tüte voller Snacks. Hab gerade so eins rausgenommen, dass ich auf dem Erdbeere. GG's. Wie kann ich so dumm sein? Die habe ich eingekauft mit geschlossenen Augen. Boah, das schmeckt bestimmt auch gut. Habe ich nie gesehen bei mir. Aber ich habe nie Erdbeere probiert. Ich will nicht Erdbeere.
One enemy remaining. Last player standing. Spike down mid.
Soll ich mal eins probieren und sagen, wie schmeckt? Dein Wocheneinkauf an Süßigkeiten, genau, Green. Einen gehabt in der Früh und dann war ich direkt Snacks kaufen. Leute, man zocken ohne keine Snacks nebenbei zu haben. Ich brauche Snacks. Also kein normaler Mensch kann zocken lang und nicht Snacks haben. Hast du allgemein nie eine Erdbeere probiert? Ich liebe Erdbeere Eki und Erdbeeren mit Schokolade, aber in dem Soft Cakes mag ich das nur mit dem Orangengeschmack. Ich habe Erdbeeren nie probiert. Was, wenn das so eklig ist? Aber richtig.
Oh my god, why is Destiny trending now? Anyway, I got other stuff I need to be doing.
Sayonara. Greetings.
So man, when to do the oh my god.
Sayonara.
I am ready to put on a
I'm not there yet. They overlap, nice. Get back, get back. I have my ult after, I have my ult.
I'm going left side, I need assistance.
I'm doing ult backline.
I have an ult on
I don't even know what I just clicked. What did you do?
Venom can die.
Wow, 4 in a row.
All those out of sight.
Tyler card. That is one.
The current score is
Yeah, I actually like this.
Soft man, when to do
0.
Oh, Amelia, you're probably not enjoying the moonlight there.
Including which side
Oh,
you're
it's alright,
on.
I'm just throwing Anx at the backline. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think you're creating good pressure. I mean, I don't know, I'm able to do a lot, which means, I don't know, you're probably doing something right.
The
I'm gonna
right
play around
heroes
you.
could make
Let's-
all the difference.
When you see Viper jump towards me, I'll damage both of us and just burst him down, yeah? Because he keeps jumping on me.
Nah, I'm not GM2.
I mean, if it doesn't work on defense, I'll just go Hawkeye and go through this show.
Gonna get sticky!
Or I go Starlord and join you on flank.
Round 2. Go.
I'm just a sword for hire. This is all so much bigger for me.
Okay, Emilio?
We'll be coming in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I stuck with
Stay
you.
strong.
Okay, okay.
But I say, if this two goes away, I'll just go Starlord and flank or Hawkeye. And
Yeah.
The Collector took me from my world with no way to return.
We will get you back home. If your timeless exists.
And if it doesn't, I will cleave these dooms into two.
Thanks,
for
one, you're
what
way
they've
too
done.
difficult to use.
The battle starts in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You need to stop that vehicle in its tracks.
Harder than ever.
Fucking Iron Fist?
Starlord one.
Wait, they... Oh, never mind. I'm gonna shoot this Venom.
Better stop that vehicle.
I don't give up. Step aside. Gokienyo.
Alright, well, I got, got my skills here. Ready to go crazy in the backline.
Harder than ever.
They're all pushed up, they're really far pushed up. Iron Fist one. Hold Venom.
Starlord left side, left side.
Kill the Mantis. I'm stuck.
You betrayed my trust, Mantis.
I mean, I think we should stay inside this
Too,
building.
I'm too old to be playing airs like this. This is crazy. Some of my friends at work today, I missed out. If I had started playing like Call of Duty when I was younger, maybe I could be playing this right now. But I'm too old. I don't. Even when I was playing Battleborn and Evolve, I was not that fast.
Oh, there's a fucking wall. Okay.
He stopped them in their tracks.
Back off, bro. I'm gonna try to stay blind though, just in case.
Below.
Lift your wings.
Solid half a zone.
Wait, what? There's a controversy? What do you mean?
Over the past week or so, I've been playing a substantial amount of Early Access Path of Exile 2, and having witnessed how the community is sort of eating itself in a way, that's kind of extreme, but it gets the point across. I wanted to talk about what the game is, why that's been happening, and give my take overall on where it goes from here. Or maybe where I think it should go from here, which isn't necessarily guaranteed, though I do think it's likely. Obviously, anyone choosing to watch this right now knows that Path of Exile 2 just recently opened up for early access, but maybe what they don't know is that the community is extremely divided. On one side, you have a horde of players relentlessly complaining about difficulty, as well as other uncomfortable mechanics that they want to be changed. And on the other, you have a throng of gatekeepers who smugly pretend that the only real issues in the game are skill issues, and that anyone complaining simply needs to get good in order to fix the experience. I'll cut right to the chase here. They're both wrong, and while I do have to admit there's a pretty good chunk of people in the middle with nuanced opinions on the matter, more so than most other gaming communities out there, to their credit, it's a pretty deep chasm between these two main sort of groups, and they don't really seem to be willing to give up any ground. A little backstory on me here personally, because one of the groups is incredibly elitist and often completely unwilling to entertain any opinions whatsoever from those that they deem as lesser to them in terms of raw game knowledge, but I've played Path of Exile since maybe 2014, covered the game with YouTube content since roughly 2018, and played maybe 20 or so different challenge leagues in that time frame. I was flown out to Los Angeles in the first wave of creators chosen to play Path of Exile 2 early. I've interviewed Jonathan Rogers directly, one-on-one, though I never ended up posting the footage, and I was invited to fly out again, sadly having to cancel last minute for completely unrelated reasons. I'm saying all this because the inability for this game's hardcore audience to handle practically any sort of dissenting opinion ever is kind of legendary. And while I'm certainly far from the best at constructing builds, and I haven't been playing since the literal first day of beta, for the original at least, hopefully this will be enough to get it through most people's heads, that if we were to think of this as an us versus them type situation, I would fall squarely on the side of the hardcore. Yet, despite the fact that I would be undeniably considered part of that in-crowd, I intend to viscerally criticize them here as one of the greatest problems with the game overall. Feel free to downvote, be my guest, but here's how I see it. Path of Exile 2 is a viral phenomenon with millions of players, peaking at roughly 1.2 million concurrent viewers on Twitch day one, while over 500,000 players were on Steam charts, with an untold number using their own proprietary launcher as well. Probably in excess of 1 million concurrent players of the game, in addition to just the viewers on Twitch. The game is incredibly successful in all conceivable metrics. The design is good, the artistry is incredible, the sound, customization, boss mechanics especially, campaign, it's all good. Very good. But despite the fact that we've been given something amazing here, there are flaws, and those flaws are dividing the player base. I can't do an actual review right now, by the way, because I haven't done everything I want to yet in-game. I'm halfway through the end game on one build, rounding out another character on the side, which is coming along pretty well.
Okay, if the best
I certainly do plan to do a review
why would I
eventually,
go to?
but long before that time comes, I feel like I need to talk about community
Can I not do
dynamics. This is what I see. Path of
1080p
Exile 1
60?
has over a decade of content, and with that comes a very large and extremely dedicated audience. However, Path of Exile 1 is a knowledge game. I'm very likely to offend some people here, which they're gonna let me know about in the comment section, but Path of Exile 1 is not skill-based. You do not need talent, practically any kind, in order to do well in that game. All you need is knowledge and time. Yes, you can argue that certain endgame content requires quick reflexes, pinpoint reactions, positioning, or awareness, but even then, with certain builds, no it doesn't. And the bottom line is that the original game feels like a mile-wide, 6 miles deep experience, in a very good way, with an overwhelming emphasis on how much knowledge you have, which personally is something I love about it. Path of Exile 2 is not like that. It is, in a sense, very similar in terms of rewarding player knowledge, right? Obviously, it should do that. However, an added component of the game, an emphasized component I might add, is skill. And this component is being reinforced right now in a targeted way by the developers, which is a big part of the reason why the player community is so divided. Let's get something straight. Path of Exile 1 is a turn your brain off type of raw gameplay experience. You certainly think about what choices you make for gear or skill selection, but the real gameplay overall is just turn your brain off, press 3 buttons in rapid succession over and over, cruise through the world at like Mach 15, and get millions of drops. Just don't kid yourselves, that's what it is. People love it. I myself love it, to be clear, but Path of Exile 2 is not quite like that. They don't want it to be like that, right? The developers, they will make an effort, they are making an effort actively to prevent you from playing it in that way, and you will most likely, aside from a few outliers, need to play this game with your brain switched on. Most people, not everyone, there's always exceptions, but most people simply can't play the sequel the same way as the original. They are incapable of doing so. I'm one of them, by the way. And with that realization, for some, comes anger. This creates a sizable chunk of the player base who are displeased at the game's perceived difficulty because they went from a deactivated brain simulator, where they just get the constant dopamine hit of loot drops by pressing 3 buttons with no skill as fast as possible, to a tension kind of experience, where they're completely unprepared to do anything other than rapidly press those 3 buttons. That's the core of group number 1. Alright, as of this, joining them, the current residents of group number 1, that is yet another group, this time composed of players who are coming in brand new to the franchise overall. I'm talking about Diablo 4 players, maybe, general ARPG fans. Just people who thought that Path of Exile 2 was their entry point to the series, and they're jumping in with none of the prerequisite knowledge or pattern thought process type experience from the original game, putting them at a severe disadvantage when it comes to building out their characters. Does that make sense? 2 main groups melded together into one. Fans of the previous game who are unwilling or unable to accept that this is now a brain-on kind of combat experience, and fresh players who maybe accept that reality and they're okay with it, but what they don't have is the prerequisite knowledge from the original game, skill tree type of stats that matter on gear, resistances, etc., etc., handicapping them in a way that more than likely requires dozens of hours to solve minimum, which includes careful reading, understanding math, experimentation, repetition, a bit of grinding, and most of all, pattern recognition, reflexes, and perseverance. It's unbelievably rewarding when you sink that time in, but it's daunting for those that haven't done it yet. Those 2 groups now find themselves combined on one side of the divide because they're struggling, but their response is to demand changes. They want the game to be easier, they want the game to be faster, they want more drops, they want the game to be more fun for them. And they're not wrong for wanting that, to be clear. We always want things that are better for us, that's part of being human. They're just wrong for assuming that they should ever actually get it. GGG, Grinding Gear Games, the developers, seem to have a relatively fixed vision that is different from what the original game is now. And if we claim to accept that video games are a form of artwork, we need to also accept that this new vision should be respected. They do not want Path of Exile 2 to resemble the original in terms of pacing, drop frequency, and power creep. Though that kind of stuff happens over time, so who knows about the future. Path 1 didn't look like it does now back in the day either, but whatever. That's group 1. New players and some veterans who just aren't well equipped for what the game is. Group number 2 is a lot more simple. It's a big crowd of angry elitists who really just need to mostly shut up. They've rightly identified that the game is intentionally difficult. They maybe hyper-abuse metamechanics, which the original game's community is almost abusively obsessed with, to a point where a lot of them will put down or discredit on principle build that doesn't do damn percent all content possible with ease, aggressively forsaking the idea of personalized fun if that fun is not as good as it should be, in favor of one-track minded efficiency. And they maybe have a large pre-existing knowledge pool, or they just like the experience of figuring out intricate details and overcoming obstacles, which is completely understandable, but their response is to shut down any criticism of the game as invalid, writing off most complaints as whining of the unskilled, which is entirely unproductive and short-sighted. Before anyone starts chiming in with things like, that's not actually how the community is, let me make something perfectly clear. I have made content for Path of Exile going back many years, and I'll eat a slice of humble pie right here. I've made extremely mediocre content for Path of Exile as well, trying to maybe branch out and do Path of Exile builds after I transitioned out of a different game called Tom Clancy's The Division. I tried my best, and the builds functioned perfectly fine. I could do tier 15 maps, etc., etc. but I have personally been the recipient of the direct messages about how stupid they are, those builds, and how inefficient my tips were, and how I'm wrong about stat allocation, and here's why your build is shit. I have felt the way that this community reacts to anything that they perceive as inferior or uninformed, and it's really not pretty, guys. That's not to say that they're wrong, to be fair, because the content I made really wasn't the best possible combination of stats. It was mediocre, and the mechanics that I was using weren't the best things possible in the entire game, okay? It's just factually true. Not even close, right? Like, I had a lot to improve on. But from the perspective of someone who receives mass amounts of feedback on the content that I post, I can tell you